Commander Juwu Park stood tall despite feeling small. The Martian training facility's high ceilings and wide doorways had been designed for the Thalians, making the human diplomats look like children in comparison. The red dust of Mars still clung to his boots as he faced Grandmaster Kale for the first time. The Thalian towered over him, nearly 9 feet tall with 4 muscular arms. Kale's skin had a bluish-gray tone that reminded Juwu of polished slate, and the ridges above his yellow eyes furrowed as he examined the 6 humans before him. "These are the best warriors your planet offers," Kale asked the human translator, who nervously conveyed his words. Juwu stepped forward before the translator could answer. "We are diplomats, not warriors," he said clearly. "We come to learn and understand, not to fight." The other 5 human ambassadors stood behind him. Minju, the quick-witted physicist. Doyen, the former military strategist. Hana, the cultural anthropologist. Shunho, the medical doctor. And Soman, the linguistics expert. They had been chosen for their mental flexibility and calm temperaments, qualities needed for humanity's first extended cultural exchange. Kale circled them slowly, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. "The High Command believes sharing our combat arts will build trust. I believe it will only build bruises." The 3 other Thalian instructors made sounds that the humans' translators identified as laughter. "We are prepared for difficulties," Juwu replied. "Humans have many martial traditions of our own. Though we lack your strength and extra limbs, we have learned to adapt." Kale stopped circling and fixed his yellow eyes on Juwu. "Show me one of your Earth combat forms." Juwu nodded and took a moment to center himself. He began a traditional taekwondo pattern, each movement precise and controlled. The Thalians watched with their heads tilted, occasionally muttering to each other. When Juwu finished, Kale approached him. "Interesting. Your movements lack power but have precision. Tomorrow we begin with basic forms. Rest now. You will need your strength." The first week of training was brutal. The humans struggled to replicate movements designed for beings with 4 arms and twice their strength. Bruises bloomed across their bodies as they fell repeatedly on the training mats. "This is impossible," Doyen muttered after failing for the 20th time to complete a defensive sequence. "We simply don't have the anatomy for this." Juwu watched the Thalian students practicing in another section of the facility. Their movements were powerful but separated. Each arm operated almost independently, creating a storm of blocking and striking limbs. That night, unable to sleep from the pain in his muscles, Juwu studied recordings of the day's training. He noticed something about the Thalian forms. They relied on separate limb strength rather than whole-body movement. In human martial arts, power often came from the core, from turning the hips and creating a kinetic chain. The next morning, Juwu approached the practice differently. Instead of trying to reproduce the exact Thalian movements, he adapted them. Where Thalians used 4 separate blocks, he created a flowing sequence that accomplished the same defensive coverage through continuous motion rather than separate actions. Kale noticed immediately. "Stop," he commanded, approaching Juwu. "What are you doing? That is not the form I taught." Juwu bowed respectfully. "Grandmaster, I cannot move as a Thalian moves, but perhaps I can achieve the same purpose in a human way. Show me again." Over the next few days, Kale watched closely as the humans each began finding their own adaptations. Minju discovered ways to use the Thalians' weight against them. Hana developed techniques that used the humans' greater flexibility. Shuno created defensive movements that exploited the blind spots in Thalian vision. 2 weeks into the training, Kale pulled Juwu aside after a session. "You said you were diplomats, not warriors," the Thalian said. "That's correct. Yet you learn combat techniques faster than any species we have encountered. How?" Juwu considered this. "Humans have always had to adapt. We are not the strongest, fastest, or toughest creatures, even on our own planet. Our survival has always depended on our ability to learn and change." Kale was quiet for a moment. Perhaps that is why the High Command chose to share our arts with humans first. Our other alliances are with species more like ourselves, strong, with similar physical forms. And you've never faced the challenge of teaching someone so different, Juwu suggested. No, it is refreshing. Kale demonstrated a complex sequence with his 4 arms. Tomorrow I will show you our sacred Kaval form. It has never been taught to non-Thalians. The next day, when Kale demonstrated the ancient form, he watched Juwu with new attention. After the human's 3rd attempt to adapt the movements, Kale placed one of his 4 hands on Juwu's shoulder. Your body is weak, Kale told Park, but your mind adapts quickly. Interesting. For the first time, Juwu saw something like respect in the alien's yellow eyes. The red Martian afternoon light streamed through the high windows of the training facility as Juwu Park and Hyun Kim practiced together in a corner of the massive hall. 3 months of daily training had transformed their bodies, adding lean muscle and a graceful evolution, Kale countered. Remember the founding principle of Kaval. True strength adapts to overcome all obstacles. That evening, Juwu found Hyun in their quarters, studying recordings of Thalian training sessions. Hyun had been a dance instructor before joining the diplomatic corps, and his understanding of movement had proven valuable. I realized something today, Hyun said without looking up. The Thalians never needed to develop efficiency in their combat. With 4 arms and their natural strength, they could afford to use separate, powerful movements. But humans had to become efficient to survive. Juwu added, understanding immediately. Exactly. We've always had to do more with less. Hyun pointed to the screen. Look at how much energy they use for simple actions. They're incredible fighters, but they waste power. The next day, Hyun asked to demonstrate something to the class. He invited a Thalian student to attack him repeatedly at full speed. The alien was twice his size, with 4 powerful arms, yet Hyun defended himself for nearly 2 minutes without being hit, his movements continuous and flowing. When they finished, Hyun was drenched in sweat but still standing. The Thalian was breathing hard too, harder than expected for such a short exercise. How are you not exhausted? The Thalian asked. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Dr. Chono explained to the curious aliens. Our ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're built for endurance. Kale stepped forward. It seems humans and Thalians have different strengths. Your adaptations are not corruption, but complementary approaches. Over the following weeks, the training changed. Instead of simply teaching humans to perform Thalian techniques poorly, the instructors began working with the humans to develop hybrid forms that played to human strengths. They discovered that human fine motor control allowed for targeting precision that Thalians struggled to match. Human flexibility enabled joint locks and escapes impossible for the more rigid Thalian anatomy. And the human ability to coordinate their entire body as one unit created surprising power despite their smaller frames. One afternoon, Juwu watched Hyun working with Narration, the junior instructor who had compared his movement to water. They were developing the new technique together, neither purely Thalian nor purely human. I never expected this outcome, Juwu said to Kale, who stood beside him. Nor did I, the Thalian master admitted. We came to teach, but we are also learning. Do you think the High Command will be disappointed that we're not simply copying your techniques? Kale's mouth formed what Juwu had learned was a Thalian smile. The High Command sent us to build understanding between our peoples. I believe we are achieving that goal in ways they never anticipated. Across the training floor, Hyun executed a spinning move that flowed seamlessly into a lock that even worked on a 4-armed opponent. Narration nodded with approval. You know, Juwu said, I think we're creating something entirely new here. Yes, Kale agreed. Something neither human nor Thalian, but perhaps better than either alone. 1 year had passed since the first human diplomats began training with the Thalians on Mars. What started as a simple cultural exchange had evolved into something far more significant. The training facility had expanded 3 times to accommodate new arrivals from Earth, military personnel, athletes, and martial arts experts who had heard about the revolutionary combat system being developed. Captain Yunli stepped off the transport shuttle, her eyes widening at the sight of the massive domed complex that now dominated this section of the Martian landscape. As a former Olympic judo gold medalist, she had been specifically recruited to help integrate Earth's grappling techniques with the emerging adaptive combat synthesis. Juwoo Park greeted her at the airlock. His body had changed dramatically from the diplomat who had first arrived on Mars. Lean, purposeful muscle had replaced the softness of office work, and he moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost unnatural. "Captain Lee, welcome to Mars," he said with a bow. "We've been looking forward to your arrival." "The videos I've seen are impressive," Yum replied, returning the bow. "But I have questions about how ground fighting can work against opponents with 4 arms." Juwoo smiled. "You'll see soon enough. Grandmaster Kale is particularly interested in meeting you." Inside the facility, Yum was stunned by the sight of humans and Thalians training together. In one area, Hyun Kim was demonstrating a spinning technique to a group of mixed species. In another, a Thalian instructor was carefully analyzing slow-motion recordings of human movements. "This is much more advanced than I expected," Yun admitted. "It's evolved quickly," Juwoo explained. "We call it adaptive combat synthesis now. ACS for short. It's neither human nor Thalian martial arts, but something entirely new." Grandmaster Kale approached them, his height still imposing despite Yun's familiarity with Thalian physiology from her briefings. He placed his lower right hand over his chest in a Thalian greeting. "Captain Lee, your achievements in Earth combat arts are impressive. I look forward to seeing how your expertise enhances ACS." Over the next 2 months, Yum worked closely with both human and Thalian instructors. She discovered that while Thalians were nearly impossible to defeat with traditional throws, due to their 4 arms and superior strength, they were surprisingly vulnerable to certain joint manipulations and chokes that exploited their different anatomy. She also introduced breathing techniques from Earth's martial traditions that helped humans generate more internal power. Combined with the momentum-based movements already developed in ACS, these techniques allowed humans to create striking power that surprised even the Thalians. One morning, Admiral Dae Sung of Earth's United Defense Force arrived unannounced. The imposing man watched training sessions all day without comment, his face giving away nothing. As evening approached, he finally requested a meeting with both human and Thalian leadership. "What I've seen today changes everything," Admiral Sung said to the assembled group. "This isn't just cultural exchange anymore. ACS represents a revolutionary combat system." Grandmaster Kale nodded. "It has evolved beyond our expectations. I propose a formal demonstration," the Admiral continued. "A friendly tournament between human ACS practitioners and Thalian warriors. A public event to showcase what we've achieved together." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. Humans were still physically outmatched by Thalians, shorter, weaker, with half as many limbs. In traditional combat, the outcome would be predictable and potentially embarrassing for humanity. Would such a competition not highlight the physical disadvantages humans face? Asked one of the Thalian officials. Admiral Sung smiled confidently. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it will demonstrate that ACS has overcome those disadvantages." After much debate, the tournament was approved. 6 weeks of intensive preparation followed. 20 human practitioners, including Yunli, were selected to compete against 20 Thalian warriors in various weight and skill categories. The day of the tournament arrived. A temporary arena had been constructed, with delegates from both Earth and the Thalian homeworld in attendance. Cameras broadcast the event to both planets. The first matches went as expected. Despite their ACS training, most humans were simply overpowered by their Thalian opponents. By midday, humans had lost 8 matches and won only 1, when Hyun Kim managed to exhaust his opponent through superior endurance. Then came Yunbli's match against Krax, a Thalian warrior renowned for his speed. He towered over her, his 4 arms rippling with muscle. "This will be quick," someone muttered in the stands. When the signal to begin came, Krax launched forward with surprising speed for his size. But Yun didn't retreat. She stepped toward him, ducking under his first strike and moving inside his reach. Her hands touched his leading arm briefly, not striking, but sensing. Krax's 4 arms became a blur as he attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. Yun seemed to flow around the strikes, her body never where his hands expected to find her. When she moved, it was with purpose. Small touches to his arms, subtle shifts in position. The crowd grew quiet, watching in confusion. This didn't look like fighting as either species understood it. 3 minutes in, Krax's attacks grew stronger but less coordinated. He was using more energy with each movement while Yun remained composed, her breathing controlled. "What is she doing?" a Thalian observer asked. "Waiting," Ju answered from nearby. "And redirecting." When Krax committed to a powerful 4-armed strike, Yun finally moved decisively. She stepped into him rather than away, her hands guiding rather than blocking his momentum. Using his own force and a perfectly timed hip movement, she redirected the massive Thalian completely off balance. The crowd gasped as Krax hit the mat with a thunderous impact. Before he could recover, Yun had applied a specialized lock that immobilized 3 of his 4 arms by using their anatomical connections against each other. A technique impossible to use on a human but devastatingly effective against a Thalian. After 10 seconds of struggling, Krax signaled his submission. The arena fell silent, then erupted in astonished applause. By the end of the tournament, humans had won 7 of their 20 matches, nearly 30% victory rate against opponents who should have dominated them completely. In the final ceremony, Grandmaster Kale approached Admiral Sung with a formal request. "The Thalian High Command wishes to expand our exchange program," he said. "But this time, we request the human masters teach us your martial arts in return." His eyes found Yunbli in the crowd. "You have shown us that there is much we can learn from each other." Major Jin Kang stood at the viewport of the Proxima Research Station, watching the stars. The joint human-Thalian facility orbited a distant moon in a system that both species found interesting for different reasons. Humans were studying the unusual radiation patterns. Thalians were more interested in the rare minerals on the moon's surface. Jin had been practicing ACS for just over 2 years now. As military personnel, she'd been in the second wave of humans trained in the revolutionary combat system. Now she commanded the small security team at this remote outpost, 3 humans and 2 Thalians tasked with protecting 30 researchers. A soft chime from her wrist device pulled her attention away from the stars. It was Dr. Minji-Yoon, the neurologist who had been scanning ACS practitioners for the past 6 months. "Major, could you come to the medical bay? I have something to show you." When Jin arrived, she found Minji staring at a wall of brain scans with an expression of wonder. "These are from your latest session," Minji said, pointing to the top row of images. "And these are from 6 months ago, when you first arrived." Jin looked at the colorful images but couldn't see any significant difference. "What am I looking for?" Minji touched a control panel, and the images overlapped with highlighted areas. "These neural pathways, they've developed new connections, many new connections, and these areas related to spatial processing are showing activity patterns I've never seen before." "Is something wrong with my brain?" Jin asked. "The opposite. Your brain is adapting in ways we didn't think possible in adults." Minji pulled up more images. "It's not just you. Every human practicing ACS shows similar development. The more advanced the practitioner, the more pronounced the changes." Jin thought about how her perception had shifted over the years of training, the way she could now sense movement before it happened, how she could feel the flow of energy through her body and the space around her. "Does this explain why ACS works so well against physically superior opponents?" she asked. "I think so," You're not just learning new movements. Your brain is developing new ways to process spatial information and predict movement patterns. Minji looked excited. This could have applications far beyond combat. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert. Commander Tev, the Thalian security chief, appeared on the communication screen. Major Kang, sensors have detected 3 unidentified vessels approaching rapidly. They're not responding to hails. Jin was already moving. Battle stations. I'll be right there. In the command center, the situation was tense. The approaching ships were now visible on the main screen. Sleek, predatory vessels, unlike any Jin had seen before. Duraxian attack cruisers, Tev said grimly. They rarely venture this far from their territory. Duraxians. Jin had heard of the species, a reptilian race known for their aggression and territorial disputes with several other species, including Thalians. They've been unusually quiet since news of the ACS tournament spread, Tev explained. Now we know why. They were planning this. The first shot came without warning, rocking the station. Jin grabbed a console to steady herself as alarms blared. They're targeting our propulsion systems, reported one of the technicians. They want to disable us, not destroy us. Jin evaluated their options quickly. The station had minimal defensive capabilities, and their only escape pods wouldn't outrun Duraxian cruisers. They'll board us, Tev predicted. They must want the research data. Jin nodded. Then we defend from inside. Get all non-combat personnel to the central hub. Seal all secondary access points. As they prepared for boarders, Jin addressed her small team. The Duraxians don't know about ACs except as rumors. They're expecting easy targets when they face humans. We can use that. The boarding came 20 minutes later. Cutting tools burned through the outer airlock, and armored Duraxians poured into the station. They were imposing figures, 7 feet tall with scaled skin and powerful tails they used for balance and as weapons. Jin and her team waited in strategic positions, letting the Duraxians advance toward what seemed like lightly defended areas. When the first group passed through a narrower corridor, Jin gave the signal. She dropped from a maintenance shaft above, landing between 2 Duraxians. Before they could react, she moved in the flowing style of advanced ACS. Her hands touched pressure points on the nearest Duraxian's neck and arm simultaneously, causing momentary neural disruption rather than trying to match its strength. As the creature stumbled, Jin was already moving to the next one, redirecting its tail strike back against its own teammate. The Duraxians fired their weapons, but Jin seemed to know where the shots would go before they were fired, flowing around the energy beams like water around rocks. Similar scenes played out across the station as the human defenders used their ACS training. They didn't try to overpower the Duraxians, but instead used precision, timing, and the aliens' own momentum against them. The Thalian security members fought alongside them, their 4-armed power combining perfectly with human fluidity in the joint techniques they had developed. What should have been a quick takeover of a lightly defended research station turned into a confusing and frustrating battle for the Duraxians. Their superior numbers and firepower couldn't compensate for their inability to predict or counter the humans' movement patterns. After an hour of fighting, the Duraxian commander called a retreat. As they withdrew, Jin's team managed to capture one of their officers. The reptilian alien glared at Jin from where he was secured in the medical bay. "What are you?" he demanded. "You fight like nothing we have studied." "We're just humans," Jin replied simply. "Impossible. Your movements, they were unnatural. You knew where our strikes would land before we made them." Unknown to either of them, the station's security system was recording this conversation, along with footage of the humans defending against the Duraxian boarding party. 3 days later, when a Thalian defense fleet arrived to secure the station, they brought news that the security footage had somehow been leaked to interstellar communications networks. The images of humans, physically smaller and seemingly weaker, successfully defending against Duraxian forces had spread rapidly. "The Galactic Council is in an uproar," reported the Thalian captain. Several species are requesting formal alliances with Earth. Others are reconsidering their previous dismissal of humans as a minor species. Jin looked at Minji, who had continued her neural research even during the attack. "What do your scans show now?" she asked quietly. Minji showed her the latest results. The neural activity during combat was off the charts. It's as if your brain was processing information faster than should be possible. They move differently than any species we've encountered, the captured Diraxian officer had told his interrogators. It's as if they can predict attacks before they happen. He wasn't entirely wrong, Jin thought. ACs had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand, not just her body, but her mind. And if Minji's research was correct, this was just the beginning of what humans might become. The Great Hall of Unity on Mars gleamed under the light of 1,000 floating lords. 5 years had passed since that first awkward training session, when 6 human diplomats had faced their 4-armed Thalian instructors with a mixture of determination and doubt. Now, representatives from 27 different species filled the vast chamber, all gathered to witness the 5th anniversary demonstration of adaptive combat synthesis. Director Ju Park stood tall at the center of the demonstration floor. At 45, his hair now showed touches of gray at the temples, but his movements remained fluid and precise. Around him stood 30 practitioners, 15 humans, and 15 Thalians, all wearing the simple black uniforms that had become the standard for ACS training centers across 2 worlds. In the front row of seats, Grandmaster Kale watched with clear pride. His once slate-blue skin had faded to a paler shade with age, and he now used a ceremonial staff to support himself. Beside him sat Dr. Minji-Yoon, whose neurological research into ACS had revolutionized understanding of brain plasticity across multiple species. "It is my honor to welcome you all to this demonstration," Ju began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. What began as a simple cultural exchange has grown into something none of us could have predicted. At his signal, the practitioners formed pairs, each human with a Thalian partner. What followed left even those familiar with ACS breathless. The pairs moved in perfect synchronization, human fluidity complementing Thalian power. When they engaged in controlled sparring, it became impossible to tell who was attacking and who was defending. The movements flowed together as one continuous action. Minji leaned toward Kale. "The neural scans from last month's study are remarkable," she said quietly. "The human practitioners show brain activity patterns that match their Thalian partners during synchronous movement. It's almost as if their nervous systems are communicating directly." Kale nodded. "And our warriors report similar experiences. Young Thalians who train in ACS develop neural pathways previously unseen in our species." On the floor, the demonstration shifted to practical applications. Human Thalian pairs showed how they had used ACS techniques in recent peacekeeping missions. Instead of subduing aggressors with overwhelming force, they demonstrated control methods that immobilized without injury. The incident on Proxima Station was the turning point. A Galactic Council representative commented from nearby. When footage of those human defenders went public, it changed everything. No one had ever seen combat like that before. The Council had granted Earth elevated status just 6 months after the Diraxian attack. What had begun as a minor diplomatic initiative had reshaped humanity's place in the galactic community. But the transformation went far beyond politics. AC's training centers had opened in every major city on Earth. Students reported improvements not just in physical skills, but in concentration, emotional regulation, and learning ability. Schools had begun incorporating simplified ACS movements into daily routines, with studies showing significant improvements in children's cognitive development. The business sector had embraced ACS principles for team building and creative problem solving. The healthcare industry had adapted the breathing and movement techniques to help patients recover from injuries and neurological conditions. As the main demonstration concluded, Ju invited Kale to join him on the floor. The elderly Thalian moved slowly but with dignity to stand beside his former student. Today we honor the journey that began with skepticism and has led to true partnership, Zhu said, bowing deeply to his teacher. Kale returned the bow, using all four arms in the formal Thalian gesture of highest respect. Then he turned to address the assembled guests. When I was assigned to teach humans our combat arts, I believed it would be a simple task, showing a physically inferior species how to imitate our movements as best they could. His deep voice carried a hint of humor now. I could not have been more wrong. The audience laughed softly. We intended to teach humans to fight like Thalians, Chill continued. Instead, humans taught the entire galaxy, that true strength comes not from physical prowess, but from adaptation, integration, and evolution. He gestured toward a young Thalian standing nearby. My granddaughter, Coral, began her training in the human-developed forms. Her generation will not know a world where our species trains separately. They will build on what we have started, taking it to places we cannot yet imagine. As if on cue, Coral stepped forward and bowed to Zhu. Director Park, would you honor me with guidance? Zhu smiled and moved to the center of the floor with the young Thalian. What followed was not a demonstration of power but of precision. Zhu guided Coral through a series of movements originally developed for human physiology. The young Thalian's four arms moved in ways no traditional Thalian would have considered, not as separate weapons but as integrated parts of a unified whole. The audience watched in fascinated silence. Here was the ultimate reversal, a human master teaching a Thalian student techniques developed by humans after adapting Thalian arts. When they finished, Coral bowed again. Thank you, teacher. Kale's eyes shone with emotion as he watched his granddaughter. He turned to Zhu. When we began, did you ever imagine this outcome? Zhu shook his head. Never. I was just trying not to embarrass myself in front of your four arms. The two old friends shared a laugh that bridged their differences. Later, as the formal reception continued around them, Hyum Kim found Zhu standing alone, watching the mingling of species that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Quite a journey from those first bruising days of training, Hyun said. Zhu nodded. I was thinking about something Minji told me yesterday. The latest research shows that the neural changes from ACS training might be hereditary, at least partially. Human children born to ACS practitioners show unusual neural development from birth. Evolution in action, Hyun mused. Not just cultural evolution, but biological. Across the room, they watched as Captain Yunli demonstrated a technique to an interested group of diplomats from a newly contacted species. The aliens' physiology was wildly different from either humans or Thalians, yet Un was already finding ways to adapt the principles of ACS to their unique bodies. That's the real legacy, Zhu said softly. Not just a new way of fighting, but a new way of learning, a new way of adapting. As the celebration continued around them, a message arrived from Earth. The Global Education Council had just approved ACS principles as part of the standard curriculum for all schools worldwide. The next generation would grow up with these benefits from childhood. Teaching humans alien martial arts had indeed led to unforeseen outcomes, outcomes that continue to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. What had begun as a simple exchange of combat techniques had evolved into something that was changing both species at the fundamental level, rippling outward to transform the galaxy itself. The end.